10 to 15% of my time spent outside of the metropolis supporting parishes and ministries. So it's a blessing to be working with the team um, within the metropolis. I'm actually substituting for Steve Pappas. Steve does a tremendous job hosting these and has done that for many years. Steve happens to be in Greece, and we wish him well and safe travels there. This is the fifth monthly webinar that we've done this year, and it's offered in collaboration, kind of a test with the collaboration of San Francisco, Atlanta, and Boston. And those metropolises all kind of rotate the presentation and the hosting of the event. And tonight that'll be hosted by the metropolis of Atlanta. Tonight's topic, as you probably have already seen because you signed up for it, is building a Christ-centered high trust team. And it's interesting. I happened to be at the leadership booth at the recent Clergy Lady in Cleveland, and during the ministry pavilion. And that was just a booth that allowed people to come up and ask questions about leadership or really kind of the dynamics within parish life. And it was pretty much a constant flow of individuals. And one of the questions that came up more than one time was, is a parish council a team? Or is it just a board of people that review and advise? And I'm sure that our presenters tonight will be touching on that either directly or indirectly. But I found that particularly interesting. Now, before we start, we have some housekeeping, and I'd like to share that with you. First of all, the session tonight will run about 75 minutes, so we want to be respectful, especially to those folks on the East Coast that might be getting a little bit later in the evening. So we're going to try to keep it tight to 75 minutes. What we've done in the past sessions is that we have done an extension of about 15 minutes. So, keeping in line with the World Cup, we will have a 15-minute extended period after the 75 minutes that you can just have a dialogue with the presenters. It won't be recorded, and then you can have questions and answers. What we ask during the sessions tonight is if you do have a question, you can enter that in chat or a hand raise. I will be monitoring those, but we'd like the presenters to be able to get through their content first, and it's going to be a little different. Of those of you that have been on past sessions, it's going to be a little different tonight, and I'm excited to see that. So we will try to get to those sessions, but again, the last 15 minutes, should you wish to stay, it's completely optional, unrecorded. You can just ask some questions of Tim and Mitch going forward. What I'd like to do now then is introduce Father Paul Kaplanis. Father will be offering our opening prayer and representing His Eminence Metropolitan Sebastianos, who's out of the country. And as many of you know, Father Paul has a very long and distinguished bio. I can't read it all because we'd be here a bit too long, but he's the Dean of the Annunciation Cathedral in Atlanta, and also is member of the Archdiocese Council, has held many roles as the on the Archdiocese Presbytery Council, member of the Youth Committee, president of the Clergy Syndesmos, serves as spiritual advisor of the Metropolis of Floptahos, for the Metropolis Floptahos, the Family Life Ministry, and in his spare time sits on two boards at Hellenic College Holy Cross and Annunciation Day School. Whew. So with that, I'd like to introduce Father Paul, who will offer the opening prayer.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you, everyone. It's good to see you all. Let us pray to the Lord. Lord, have mercy. O Lord Jesus Christ, our good shepherd, who washed the feet of your disciples and taught us that the greatest among us must be the servant of all. Look down upon us, your unworthy servants, and grant us the grace to be leaders, to lead successful team leaders with a pure heart and humble spirit. Deliver us from the spirit of pride, vanity, and the desire for control. Fill our hearts with genuine love for each person you have entrusted to our care. Grant us the wisdom to guide them justly, the patience to bear with their weaknesses, and the discernment to cultivate their unique gifts for your glory. Let our work together be free from conflict, gossip, and division. Build between us a bond of unshakable trust, rooted in your truth. And may our shared efforts bear fruit both for this world and for your heavenly kingdom. For you are the way, the truth, and the life, and to you we give glory together with the eternal Father and your all holy, good, and life creating Spirit, now and forever, and to the ages of ages. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father Paul. We appreciate that. And thank you for being with us this evening as well.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Right now, I'd like to introduce our speakers, Dr. Mitch Owen and Tim Tassopoulos. Uh, and we'll start a screenshot. Yes. Oops.
I'm going to get it there.
That's okay.
All right, switch screens.
Yeah. Well, there we go. We can see it.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
First, Tim Tassopoulos. Tim is the retired president and COO of Chick-fil-A. He sits on the Holy Cross Hellenic College Board of Trustees and vice president of the Metropolis Council for the Metropolis of Atlanta. And Dr. Mitch Owen is CEO of Mitchin Leadership and Organizational Development, a member of the Metropolis Council of Atlanta, and Leadership Development for Atlanta, and Leadership Development co-chair for the Metropolis of Atlanta. So it is unbelievable that we have two such talented individuals with such life experiences and experiences within our church to share their perspectives on what it means to be a Christ-centered high trust team. So with that, with anticipation, I'll turn that over to Dr. Mitch Owen, who will begin the presentation. Mitch?
Thank you, Steve. Tim and I are just really excited to share with you today some thinking that we have on Christ-centered high trust teams. But to get us started, I'd like to kind of remind us that we're going to do some things a little differently this time from previous webinars. So if you were on those, this is going to be very active. You're going to be asked to participate at times. That means getting into the chat room and being able to answer your questions we ask. So try to look at this as a journey where we are going to do shared learning throughout the first part of it. And at the end, we'll do breakout rooms. And so you will be asked to participate in a breakout room and bring your knowledge to that breakout with your peers here on the webinar. I'll ask you to respect the time and ensure that everyone gets to share, especially when you're in the breakout rooms. I'm going to recommend that you have some paper handy to take some notes, but also there's some exercises we do where we want you to capture some things that are for you personally, for just you. And we think paper being close to hand will be great. And then I'll also ask you to write down your questions so you can ask them at the end if you think of something, because we're going to try to move pretty fast through this. And to do that, I'm going to start with an exercise. And so the first exercise we want you to do is we want you to think of a team that you were on and a team that you participated on, but maybe things didn't go as great as, there wasn't as much harmony, or things didn't kind of feel trustworthy. Stephen Covey's book on Speed of Trust names these items as the visible behaviors that people put out when they're not trusting. For example, you might see in your teams that they conceal weaknesses and mistakes from each other, or they might hesitate to ask for help. You might see a member of your team not really offer to help people outside their role. I'm just worried about what I got to do, not what you have to do. Of course, we tend to jump to conclusions. We might fail to recognize or tap into other people's skills or ask for their knowledge and skills. We tend to waste time and energy. We act out. We do things that take energy away from others, and then we might also hold grudges or find reasons for avoid spending time with the team or with the group we're on. In the chat room, if you would just take a moment to think about a team you were on where it wasn't as trustworthy, and type in, what do you think were the most dominant behaviors? You might think about in your community or on the teams that you're on. And for definition's sake, because Steve raised it, teams are any group that's working toward a common goal. It could be your whole community, it could be your council, it could be a group of Sunday school teachers, it could be a group that just formed to do landscaping that week for the parish. And so think of a team that you were on, and in the chat room, share with us a behavior you've seen that might indicate someone wasn't trusting others? I told you it was going to be active, so thank you for entering. Thanks, Greg. I think we do a lot of blaming. Blaming is very good. Um, Finding a reason not to be there, avoid working with each other. Ooh, gossiping. I love it. Not asking for help. Failing to recognize other people's skills. Wasting time. These are great. Keep sharing. I see Anthony sharing a lot. I like all of us to share. If you're hesitant to share because you think, well, that would mean I was on a team that wasn't trustworthy, and I don't want to acknowledge that. I don't think anyone of our age has ever survived all the teams you've ever been on where there was not a team that wasn't as trustworthy. I think it's a human condition, and we'll talk about some of the things as we go through this workshop. But these are all excellent. I'm going to turn it over to Tim, and he's going to talk a little bit about trust now.
Thanks everybody for sharing in the chat, and it's powerful to see some of these challenges. What we want to talk about tonight is the antithesis of the kind of behaviors you just seen. What we want to talk about is trust, and Mitch and I want to capture this as team culture's ultimate force multiplier. Now, there are a couple of words in here that need understanding. Mitch just highlighted what we mean by team. It's a collection of individuals with a shared purpose. Culture is about shared beliefs and behaviors, and those can be positive and negative, healthy and unhealthy. But when we think about it in a positive way, team culture has a force multiplier, and that's trust. Now, when you hear the word force multiplier, that phrase, you may not know where that comes from, but the background is from the military. And the military thinks about force multipliers as any force that any organization creates an advantage. And it can be tangible or intangible. So from a military standpoint, a tangible force multiplier is location, the higher ground. An intangible could be morale. It could be training or leadership. Now, taking it out of the military context, when we think about a team's culture ultimate force multiplier, trust is that. Why? Because high trust on teams leads to more unified, resilient cultures. Low trust leads to skepticism, division. And so we believe that trust is the key to a healthy culture on a team. So that's why we believe that trust is a team culture's ultimate force multiplier. Now, tonight we're going to get into 4 drivers of trust. And we'll talk about these each individually, but when you hear us unpack these, you'll see at the end that they actually work together very, very well. Now, these 4 drivers of trust are going to be based on a lot of the research that Mitch and I both have experience with, as well as our own experience with effective teams. And we want to share these 4 drivers of trust with you tonight because we think that the insights that come from the identification of these 4 and the practices that can be put in place, that this will actually lead to your potential application in your parish, whether it is a parish council, whether it is catechism teachers, whether it is Hope, Joy, Goya, or Young Adult League ministry. Whatever the aspect of ministry in your parish, we believe these 4 drivers of trust can help you have a more effective team.
Thank you, Tim. So let's start with an exercise that helps us define the first driver. And to do that, I'd like you to think of the most trustworthy Orthodox leader you know. You know, we did the negative behaviors in the first chat exercise. I want you to think of the most trustworthy person that you have in your life. who is an excellent Christian, excellent Orthodox leader. And I want you to write down and put in the chat room 3 or 4 words that describe the behavior that you think of as exhibiting that trust, as building that trust. What are the things that person did that made you believe I can trust this person? This person is somebody I can rely on. And just put those in the chat room. And as they're doing it, I'd like everybody to pay attention to what we're sharing. So treats fairly, listen to everybody, moral, compassionate, trustworthy, integrity, humble, reliable, non-judgmental. Boy, y'all are doing this quick. This is wonderful. Consistent, listens well. There's one I always look for that's a tough one that I haven't seen yet. Keep going. Courageous, flexible, patient, listen, authentic. I love that. Kind, no ego, humble, shares the credit, Christ-centered, dependable, joy. Well, I want to meet each one of these people. Um, these are great. These are great. Often groups will share with me one I haven't seen yet, which is direct. They will tell you, they'll call you out in private when you're not doing something you should be doing. They want you to be successful. These are all great examples. And usually when we do this exercise in a workshop, what you'll notice is if you look back through the chat at all the shared comments, not all of them, but a great proportion of them all speak to the character of the person. What we think of when we think of character. Character is the first thing that pops in your mind when you say, "Can I trust somebody?" When we hire somebody for a job, we weed out anybody that doesn't have good, sound character. And so the first driver of trust we want to talk about this evening is character. And Tim's going to take us through a short discussion of what do we mean when we talk about character and trust in the context of a Christ-centered leader.
Thanks, Mitch. Before you go to this list, if you can go back one slide real quick. So when we do talk about character, we will, in this case, as we will in a number of times through our workshop, we're going to highlight some resources that Mitch and I both feel very comfortable with that you may consider. Most of these are books, some are videos that you might find really helpful. And for me, when we think about character, I think about Henry Cloud, who's a well-known Christian author and psychologist. You may have heard of Henry before with his longstanding work on boundaries. But Henry wrote a book called Integrity. And he defines character in that book, Integrity, this way, that it's more than don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, even though that's true. That is a key part of character, much like the behaviors that we've listed here. But he also says that a more holistic definition of character is having the capacity to deal with reality. And what that really means is that a person with character and even a team with character, they can deal with reality, difficult circumstances, and even deal with success appropriately. And so when we think about character, we think about it in that expanded definition. Now, from an Orthodox perspective, another resource that Mitch and I recommend is a book called The Theology of Leadership. And so, Mitch, if we can go to that next slide, it'd be great. And this book is written by Proto-Deacon Peter Danilchek. Some of you know Proto-Deacon Peter's work and strategy, but he's got a great book on theology of leadership. And I'd like to thank my friend, Father Andreas Hupus, for giving me this book, and it's been outstanding and a terrific help for me. This is a book from an Orthodox perspective that really breaks leadership down into its essence. And these are character qualities of a Christ-centered leader. Now, first of all, I have to say the definition of leadership that we're using before we get into the elements is leadership is not title, status, or position, as so often is thought about in our culture today. But we think of leadership as a choice. And it's a choice an individual makes to intentionally influence others and to do it for good. And so when you look at this list of the characteristics of a Christ-centered character in a leader, that Proto-Deacon Peter highlights, you see those choices: a choice to be obedient, a choice to have integrity, a choice to serve, a choice to be sacrificial, and a choice to be a shepherd leader. All of these are highlighted in that work. And when we have a group that we have responsibility to be part of as a team, and we all choose to provide leadership in that team, these are the characteristics that we believe can add to the trust on that team. So we want you to think about this. And we want to go, if you can, to the next slide. We want you to put some ideas in the chat based on your own experience. If you think about the characteristics we just talked about, the definition of character, what are specific things that you believe you can do personally that can strengthen and reinforce character on your team? So I'm going to give you about 60 seconds. What are ways you believe you can strengthen and reinforce character on your team?
I just go, write it down. You know what? And if she says anything to you, have her send you an email. What did you?
Is that an example? Lead by example, humility, keeping your word.
Tim, we have a very smart group.
It's great. Let people see you doing the work. Again, example. This is terrific. Take about 15 more seconds. Respect, collaborative input. This is terrific. Thank you. I'm going to highlight 3 that Mitch and I will offer for consideration that adds to this list. The first is, and it was highlighted a couple of times in the chat, expressing gratitude for others' effort can reinforce character in a team. When you have a culture of gratitude, you feel that character develop because people are affirmed for the effort that they're putting forth. Second is to think and to talk about the work you're doing in that ministry on that team as an act of stewardship, where we're maximizing the opportunity that God's given us in that ministry. And then lastly, helping the group focus on the proper outcomes by asking the question, what's the wise thing for us to do as a team? All of those, including many of the others you have in the chat, help to build character on the team, which leads to trust. So now we're going to shift to the second driver. Mitch is going to take us through this one.
I'm going to start out with a little story. I travel quite a bit, and I was at a conference, and I guess I should say this is a fictitious story so that you don't worry about me. But I was in a conference, and on Sunday, the conference had finished. I went to church and I did my prayers, and then I left after church, and I had the whole afternoon to see the country. And this is one of those states where there's not many people, large areas of land, and I was traveling across that land in my rental car by myself. And as the afternoon wore on, I started to have an ache in my stomach. I grabbed something quick to eat as we left from church, and I don't know if I ate the wrong thing, but I kept driving. Because this was my chance to see this beautiful state and all its land. And I would drive for miles without seeing anyone. And the more I drove, the more the pain got. And so it as I really started to feel so much pain that I felt like I needed help, I saw a crossroads and I turned into this little sign that pointed to a small township. And I pulled into this like 5 building town. And over to the left, there was a building that had a cross on it. And so I went up to the cross and knocked on the door of the building. And it was a medical facility. It was like a satellite, you know, not really an emergency room, but like a where you went if you live in this small town and you had a need. And when I got there, the PA took me in and sat me down and checked me out and immediately looked at me with a great concerned face and said, you have acute appendicitis, and this is so serious. You need surgery right now. You should have done something sooner. Um, and I'm sorry, but we're so far away. I can't get you to a hospital, but you're in luck. There are 2 doctors in our community. One is Dr. Jones, president of the parish council, high moral character, the biggest servant to our community. And the other is Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith treats everybody kind of as an object. Dr. Smith kind of takes advantages of people, likes to control folks, not the best person you'd ever meet. All those character things you posted in the last exercise, not Dr. Smith. Now, if I present this story to you and I'm sitting there with 2 choices, which doctor should I choose? Think about it. Which one would you choose? Would you choose Dr. Jones or would you choose Dr. Smith? Think about it. Which one would you choose? Have I told you enough about Dr. Jones and Dr. Smith? What if I told you Dr. Jones was a veterinarian and Dr. Smith was a gastroenterologist from Mayo Clinic that had retired there? Think about the difference in that. So when we talk about characters being important, it's a foundation. It's one of the most important, trustworthy things you have to do to be a great leader. But that alone doesn't do it. And that's best explained through Covey's work, where Covey talked about the 2 dimensions of trust. It's not just enough to have character. It's important to have competence. It's important to have skill set. If you put someone in charge of Sunday school and they don't have the skill set to manage that, they don't have the knowledge of the curriculum and the ability to manage others, then they're going to be untrusted. The parents will be concerned. They will create. So competence is the second driver that we want you to think about today. We want you to think about that from a standpoint. And I'll just say one more thing about that before we do a little sharing with you. And that is, I can remember for years individuals at our Greek festival frustrated because nobody would take over their booth, but they would bring people in to do their booth and then constantly criticize their quality of work instead of developing their skill set. And so this distrust was it just grew there. It just grew there. And so in order to trust others on the team, not only do you have to have competence in your task, but they have to have it in theirs. And we have to work together to do that. And it's not easy because we're taught not to show weakness and things like that. So I'd like you to think for a minute your role on your team. What are the things that you could do that would help cultivate a culture of knowledge and skill development? A culture that where people seek advice and where others give advice and in a way that helps grow people instead of criticize people. Think about that and put in the chat room what you would do if you were back home with your team to help cultivate. I've got a couple things I'll share after you do. Train my replacement. Thank you. That is a wonderful one. Open the door policy. Exercise patient. Make the ask. Lead by example. Give reasons for suggestions. Reinforce. Cultivate a culture of open dialogue. Show that you truly care. Ask them about their strengths. I love these. These are wonderful. A few more seconds and of sharing, being open-minded. Embrace the mistakes. Thank you. That's a wonderful one. Oh, y'all are very good at this. The challenge is for us to do this when we go home. It's not natural sometimes for us to do that. Keep sharing, but I'm going to give you a summary of some that I and Tim and I have thought about. The first one is start with yourself. You have to develop yourself. You have to be open about your own learning needs, your own weaknesses, your own areas where you want. Being able to say, I'm not sure about this, or I'm sure about that. The second is clarifying what the outcome is for roles and letting others explore how to do it and make mistakes. Almost celebrating those mistakes, celebrating the failures and caring for others because you don't learn. I can remember the first time I got left on the ovens at the Greek festival. And he knew what he was doing. I loved the guy. He was like a brother to me, but he knew I would never take over if I didn't have the ovens and make a few mistakes. And I can remember burning something, and he just said, "It's okay. Don't worry about it. Well, you'll get it." And then finally, I think we need to learn to delegate, not dump stuff on people, but be there to support them with help when they ask, and be clear with that. So the driver of competence is extremely important. It is often one reason why teams, even though they all have great character, devolve into blaming and criticizing and doing things that they shouldn't do to each other in an untrustworthy way. But two is not enough. There's a third one. And so the next one, I'm going to turn over to Tim, and he's going to talk about the third driver of trust.
So we're going to share this third driver, and we're going to do this in just a second, sharing a story from an author and a consultant, another author that we'll recommend. His name is Patrick Lencioni, and Pat's not only a good friend of Chick-fil-A and did a lot of work to help us, but he's a very active Catholic in his parish and across the Catholic tradition in the U.S. And Pat has a great story about the third driver, and we think it's one that we all could learn to improve and grow in. So let's listen up to Pat Lencioni.
Thank you. Paul, I'll ask you to stop the recording since this is a protected video.
So you can just feel the power of that story that Pat shares and think about that situation and think about how often do any of us in a leadership position miss out on the opportunity of being vulnerable. Now, from Pat's work, his research, and his consulting, he talks about the power of vulnerability. And when he thinks about trust based on his experience and his research, he talks about credibility-based trust. Now, credibility-based trust is exactly what Mitch and I are talking about in these first two drivers. It's the combination of credibility that comes from character and competence, where a leader has expressions of character and expressions of competence, and then he's perceived as credible. And then that's predictive trust, meaning it's trust based on, yeah, I have confidence in this leader, and also on a team that generally expresses good character and high levels of competence. But there's also vulnerability-based trust, which Pat just talked about. And that's when the leader or members of the team provide authentic trust, when they're vulnerable, when they are leading with transparency, they are opening up to others on the team. It's not about completely being self-focused and I'm going to share with you all of my strengths and weaknesses. It's really about the choice that you make to be authentic on the team and to be willing to share about a weakness, but not to where you make it all about yourself. You want to do it for the benefit of the team. It's about genuine, authentic expression, not fake or inauthentic expression. And Pat's not the only person who's also shown this to be so powerful. If you've not read Brene Brown or read anything from Brene Brown or listened to her podcast or TED Talk, Brene's got one of the most widely reviewed TED Talk in history, and it's called The Power of Vulnerability. And Brene talks about how significant vulnerability is, because when you're vulnerable in a team setting, as she calls it, you are taking off your armor. You're dropping some of your defensiveness, and that vulnerability opens up for other people on the team to be vulnerable themselves. And what's really important is we have to remember the significance of vulnerability and humility, because no humility means no growth. If we're not humble and open, we will not grow. Closed systems don't grow. Only open systems grow. It's true for people, for teams as well. So let's think about how we can enable a culture that embraces vulnerability. I'd love for you to go to the chat on this third driver and share from your experience or your best practices or even your recommendations. What are ways that we can enable a culture on a team to embrace vulnerability? How can we enable that culture? Let's take about 30 seconds, 45 seconds to put those ideas in the chat. Admitting mistakes. Be vulnerable first. Ask for feedback. Yes, non-judgmental. Honesty, humility. Being willing to ask for help. Honesty. Leading by example is key for all three of these: character, competence, and vulnerability. Be willing to share, loving without judgment. Being willing to acknowledge mistakes. Terrific. So let me add three for your consideration to our list here. The first one is this principle that Pat just outlined and was acknowledged in the chat. If you're the leader of the group, if you do have the formal responsibility to lead a group, whether catechism director, choir director, parish council president, there's incredible power and vulnerability when the leader goes first. When the leader can acknowledge, I missed this. I made a mistake. I'm uncertain about this. And how I'd love your help on this. It is disproportionately powerful when the leader goes first. Second, if you've never done this on a team to try to have folks open up to each other, there's a fantastic exercise called life story. Life story is when, let's say you have a parish council of 12 members, and at a particular retreat setting or a meeting you just dedicate to this, where each of the 12 members, you give each one 4 minutes to just tell their life story. And you go around the room and you don't interrupt the folks. You just let people tell their life story. You stay on time so that everybody gets that 4-minute section. But what happens is you learn so much about a person when you listen uninterrupted to them tell their life story, about their highlights, their successes, even their failures. And so that opens up that window of vulnerability. And then I'm going to give you a question that I was taught from a coach about vulnerability that is just incredibly powerful. And it's when you go to another trusted team member and ask this question. After an event, after a meeting, ask the question, what was it like to be on the other side of me? What was it like to be on the other side of me? It's when you express that vulnerability to that teammate and get that feedback that's so, so valuable. So 3 drivers of trust: character, competence, vulnerability, all that drivers that a leader can work on to build trust, and also that the team can work on to build trust. Now we'll go to the 4th driver of trust, and Mitch is going to take us through that.
So the 4th driver, to start that out, we're going to ask you a simple question, and that is, when you hear the word clicks, you know what I mean when I say clicks, what's the first or second thing that comes to your mind? What do you think of when you think about going to an assembly meeting and I say the word clicks? Type into the chat room what that means to you, what you think of. Oh, y'all, these are wonderful. Middle school, secrets, closed group, trouble ahead. Ooh, boy, I think we hit we I have to give Tim credit. He came up with this question, and it's a perfect one. It's a perfect one. So I'm gonna present to you that clicks by nature are not bad. And let me explain that in a sense from a psychology standpoint. Why do clicks form? Why do they happen? And to do that, I've got to explain how our mind works when we're in a group setting. The first thing I want you to think of is that we all need connection. We all need, now, some of us are more introverted and we don't need as much connection, but we all naturally need a connection and need to have a sense of belonging to something, to another person, to have that connection. We don't want to give up our unique self, though. And so all humans try to remain unique and independent and individual. And so our natural behavior is to want to connect with people that are safe for us, that relate to us in some way, that have some understanding of our core being, of who we are, where we came from. It's why if you go into the assembly meeting and you see people sitting and talking in groups by the islands they lived on, that their families came from in Greece, is a great example. Or the older group, the seniors all coalesce over to an area to talk about the other generations. Or maybe it's the parents of young kids, very young kids who tend to coalesce. They form cliques. They form cliques because what we're trying to do is connect to each other, but we want to do it in a safe place. We want to find a place we can be in comfort with them. And so when you see these cliques forms, it's not because people are excluding others. It's because they're looking for safety. If you think of psychology, fight or flight, well, they're not fighting, they're not flighting. They're trying to find a place where they don't have to fight or flight. And so if they're in an uncomfortable situation or if it's a difficult meeting, they're going to sit next to someone who gives them comfort, who can relate to them, who they trust. And leaders need to help others connect beyond the cliques. That our Tim and I would like to put forth to you that one of the great challenges of leading in an Orthodox parish and in a community is that our job is to help others connect and relate to each other beyond just their own culture, just beyond their own history. When we think of our Orthodox community and we see people that came from different places, but all share the same value system, the same Christian belief and values, how can we help them relate to each other? And I'll do a little anecdote here. I work with a lot of universities. I work with some of the best universities in the country. I also work with some of the universities that have the most crazy fans about their sports. One of them is Ohio State. And when I work with the Ohio State people, if I ask them how many people cared about the football game this weekend, a large number of hands always go up. And if I ask the question of the group, how many people don't care about it and really don't want to talk about what happened at the football game this weekend, believe it or not, some hands go up. That's a disconnect. And it creates a clique. The football fan clique versus the art fan clique. I use that example to help you think about how we relate to each other. We relate to each other when we have things that we have in common, that we have a way of connecting to them. And so connectivity matters. And so as you think about your role as a leader in a parish or in a community, the first thing we'd want you to think about in connectivity is that effective leaders convene more than command. They bring people together. They create relateness, whether it's having them discuss what they care about or having them share what they feel is the best activity for the meeting or whatever it is that we can get people to bring and share of their own view. In fact, think of yourself as an architect of conversations, assembling people around the right conversations. Now, conversations are very different. They're not presentations. Effective leaders engage more through facilitated discussions than they do through presentations. Instead of lecturing and presenting, they create engagement activities where people have discussions. They facilitate discussions around challenges or stories or practices rather than giving lectures about what are the challenges or what are the stories. Effective leaders also don't just focus on results, they also focus on relationships. Building relationships at the meeting is just as important as achieving the goal of the meeting or the planning effort or whatever we're doing. So they create space for relationship building, especially across groups, especially across cliques, if you want to use that word still. They design every discussion so people leave having formed some kind of deeper relationship or a new relationship. And effective leaders leverage small group discussions, and I think that's more rare than anything I've seen in all the parishes I've worked with and interacted with and been a member of, is that we don't do enough small group dialogues. We don't do, we have everybody in a big room, but we don't say, hey, break into small groups and let's talk about this issue and see what you think about it. So the use of frequent and repeated group discussions rather than one-off events, having people do small discussions about things, having regular conversations that build sharing understanding. And the example I would use there is when I think about when we have a major effort, like when we're going to try to do something like a capital campaign to build a new piece of property or a new building or a new chapel or whatever. When we have that effort, we often then start doing these small group discussions. We go to people's homes and we have small group discussions about why the parish is doing this and all that. But the truth is, we should be doing those all along because then we'd already have that strength of trust, of connectivity, and it would be so much easier to move beyond the initial challenge of can I trust you, can you trust me, but into the discussion of really what do we really want out of this. So I want you to think about connectivity. I want you to think about what goes on in your parish. When you have an assembly meeting, and I would say assembly meetings are for voting and making decisions. Do you have other meetings? Think about all the different ways that you could embed connectivity where people get to know each other in a deeper way. They develop a relationship. And I'm going to have some ideas for you in a second. But if you just think about in the chat room, share a couple of ideas about how you might go back to your parish and increase what people know about each other. Go ahead. We'll take 30 seconds and let y'all share in the chat room. These are good. Having social events. Little open house during coffee hour. Family nights. Oh, that's nice. Inviting people to your home. Intentional small group gatherings. It's natural for this to be the one you struggle with most. And all the groups that I work with across the country, I think this is the most challenging because one, it's relatively growing in need because we have a much more diverse community now. I often tell people if you think back to the early days of most of these parishes, it was a very ethnic group that started. It was all holistic. Many of them maybe even came from the same community in the same village, came to America to start this church and build on the community. So it's very easy to see now when we look at new converts, we look at third and fourth generation Orthodox Americans who maybe aren't as ethnic as their grandparents were. It becomes much harder. in groups I've worked with, things like creating cross-generational events help. That's one thing I'd say to you. You know, I remember parish that set a goal that the young people would do an activity with each different group in ministry. So they'd participate in the seniors ministry. They'd participate in helping with Philopicus for something and various things. I think it's important that it's not just about events, but it's also how you run the events. And so I would encourage you to develop small group facilitation skills, the ability to get knowledge from the group rather than always lecture, always run meetings where you're presenting, so that individuals can share and see where they have commonality. Shared learning experiences where everybody comes and teaches and learns. Asking your welcome ministry to broaden their role to community connecting, to not just focus on the new members, but also how do we help connect existing members to those new members and across ethnic and age and all different types of diversity that we see in our community. Now, Tim and I spent a lot of time developing our material, but we didn't feel like it would be proper to talk about connectivity to not do a connectivity exercise. So we're gonna load up to do that in a second. But before we do that and before we move into that, I'd like you to do something for yourself right now. I'd like you to think of the your own role as a Christ-centered high trust team leader. I want you to think of your role, not other people's role. This isn't about you defining what other commitments people should make to you, but what commitments you will make to yourself as a leader to what you will do. And I'd like you to choose one of the four drivers. We'd like for you to think about one of these: character, competency, vulnerability, or connectivity. And on a notepad, yeah, I'd like you to think about writing down what are some behaviors you will commit to? What are some things that you would do? Please don't share them in the chat. I don't want you to share them in the chat. I want you to write these down for yourself. When you go back to your parish next month, next week, next year, whenever, I want you to think about what are the behaviors that you would start adding to your repertoire, things that you do to support your community and help build high trust teams where you're at. So please write down. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. We're not going to talk, and we're just going to wait for you to write down your own behaviors. And it's very important that you do this because it will help your peers on this call that you've gone through this effort. Paul, if you want to switch hosting to me now, that would be a good time to do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Hey, Mitch, before you jump to the exercise, can I make one quick comment?
Oh, yes, please. I meant to let you speak anyway. Go ahead.
That's good. So, as we've thought about these four drivers, they are interrelated. And if you can go back to the parish and think about what are some choices you can make where you connect a number of these drivers together to build trust, they actually become an even more significant force multiplier. So let me give you an example of a best practice is to think about all the ministries in the parish, even especially if you've got a council of ministries, and you deliberately say, okay, for each ministry, if we could have a more senior person as a chair and a young adult as a co-chair, where You deliberately pursue trying to have a multi-generational co-leadership for each specific ministry. You build competence, you develop character, you show that vulnerability of having some shared leadership, and then obviously you build connectivity across generations, as well as across ministry. So that's an example of a best practice that could be impacting all four of these drivers to build trust.
Thank you, Tim. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna move you into a breakout room. You'll be in a room with 4 to 5 people. I want to set this up so that those of you that have never done this before will be successful. The first thing you need to know is I can't put you in the breakout room other than to ask you, do you want to be in there? So when I do this, you'll be prompted and it will ask you, do you want to go into this breakout room? And you just need to accept that. And it will immediately put you in a room with 4 to 5 other people. I'm doing the math right now, and I think I've got a good idea of how many needs to be. They might end up with 6, but not too many. And here's what we'd like you to do in the room. We'd like you to briefly introduce yourself, okay? But stay on task. This isn't about telling everybody your history. Just briefly introduce yourself. And then we'd like you to share a commitment, something that you're thinking about that you would do to strengthen trust on a team that you're on. You don't have to get into the details of individuals and personal stuff that you don't want to share, but just talk a little bit about why you're making that commitment and why that commitment you think will be something useful. There's one rule. Nobody is broken or needs to be fixed. So whatever anybody shares, your job is just to understand where they're coming from and listen to them. Okay? Avoid correcting them. Avoid trying to tell them they're wrong or try to fix what their commitment is. Just try to be supportive. Look for common themes. And when we come back, we might ask you to share some thoughts about that conversation. We're only going to give you about 5 to 8 minutes. This is the first time I think we've done a breakout on a webinar, so we'll see how it works. When I bring you back, I will basically hit a button and you will have 1 minute to finish your discussions, and then you will be automatically dragged back into the big room with everybody else. And so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and create the rooms. I know we didn't give you enough time, but we wanted you to, we're trying to be respectful of the time we have, as well as also give you an experience to move into a small group discussion. I'm sure you had good discussions. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to think about the conversation in general, just what was going on with the conversation. Oh, we got a mic that's back feedback. Paul, can you find that?
It's going to Father Paul.
Oh,
yeah.
So I'd like you to think of the conversation you were having with your colleagues in the small group breakout room and the nature of it, the intimacy of it and all. And don't tell me the details, but tell me what struck you about that conversation. If you could just type in the chat room, what struck you about the kind of conversation you were having? Just think about it. It wasn't the kind of conversation you have as you're walking to get coffee at the end of church. Similar goals, honest, easy, sincere, passionate, vulnerability. Oh, I love it. I love seeing that. Honest. Two of the best people. I like that, Michael. Keep sharing. While you're sharing, I'm gonna say a comment or two, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Tim, and then we can go to questions. The first thing I'd like to say to you is thank you for participating so actively in the chat room and also in your breakout room. And I wish we could have had more time in the breakout rooms. If some of you want to stay on, I'll put you back in the breakout rooms. But I do appreciate the energy you brought to everything, especially sharing and engaging. The second thing I would say is my day job is working with smart people at universities that don't always get along and often have a lot of trust issues. And I can tell you honestly, when I bring teams together and I focus on helping them go through exercises that lets them establish character, build their own competencies and share their competencies, but at the same time also share their vulnerability and also build connectivity where they have shared interests, shared common ideas and joys and happiness and memories. I often think that's one of the most rewarding parts of my job, not the final product, but just seeing those teams form. And I'll tell you the one indicator that I always look for in a high performing, high trust team, and that is they have a word or a description that out of context, you don't know what it means, but to the group, it means something very special because it's a moment where they were working on something, something vulnerable happened, they built connectivity, and only they really understand what that word means to the group. And I hope that you have those kinds of experiences with your teams. I'm going to let Tim say a few words and then we're here for questions. Tim?
Thanks, Mitch. And again, thanks to everybody for being part of this tonight. First of all, I think that the takeaway is that high trust teams are healthier, they're more productive, they're more rewarding, and they're just plain more fun. Low trust teams are the opposite, but high trust doesn't happen randomly. It's when people are intentional, especially the leadership, work together. And these four drivers are a roadmap for you and your team to be able to build higher trust, which leads to those outcomes that we just talked about. So our encouragement to you is, just as it says in Galatians 6:9, don't grow weary of doing good. Don't grow weary of doing good, because in the end, you'll reap a harvest in due time. So thank you guys for what you're doing for parishes all across the country. So we want to jump to questions, and we have time for a few more before we take the break, Steve. So we got a couple of minutes before we transition. So if
Absolutely.
you want
Are there any questions that
to, thanks, Steve.
the chat has been quite full, obviously with the breakouts and the activities, but are there any questions that anyone have for Tim or Mitch? I'm not seeing any here.
So I'll jump in with a question if I may.
Michael, go ahead.
So for a parish, not speaking necessarily of my own, but for a parish that might have different levels of trust issues, do you have recommendations on kind of a easing in to begin a process of bringing people together and developing the connectivity and et cetera? Big question.
I'll jump in first, Mitch. And then you want to add?
Go ahead, Tim.
So one of the things that's super important is to just make sure that people know that you value their input.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom line is no involvement, no commitment. If people don't feel like you want to listen to them in any ministry in the parish or across the parish overall, it's just invaluable to begin by seeking input individually by ministry or collectively across the parishes, which is one of the reasons we find that for parish growth and health, that the surveying that's done, the effective parish assessment and other surveys, is just incredibly invaluable, because people want to know that they've been heard. Mitch, what would you add?
Well, it's along the same lines, but in your regular life of the parish, you have things going on. You have efforts that you're trying to do. There's an old adage in the business of change is that slow is fast. In other words, sometimes moving too fast to an idea or to do a change without having the inquiry and the engagement with the community tends to basically seal in no change, no thing. And so what I would probably suggest is taking something you're doing and embedding in it inquiry and small group discussions, no matter how small it is, no matter how, you don't have to have a capital campaign, to have a community have discussions. The other thing I would say is it takes effort to make this happen. So if you try to do it easy, cheap, it doesn't have the impact. And I'll make one kind of bold statement, and you can disagree. I always tell people you can disagree with me, but we over rely on surveys, and surveys don't create ownership and engagement. If I survey you, you know you had input, but we didn't build any connectivity. We did not connect to each other. We did not spend time talking and having coffee and discuss why we cared about and why we answered the survey the way we answered it. And so, having some mechanism where you start building a culture where people talk and inquire and learn from each other. And then the last thing I would say is everybody has to learn to follow and to lead. Everybody has to learn to teach and to learn. And creating a culture where it's not one person always in charge or one person always knowing, learning to manage that will greatly strengthen culture over time. But I would encourage you just to take it on as a long term, we're going to work on this and we're going to build this a culture using these types of activities. And I would say you have to develop some facilitation skills to be able to do that. Other questions?
Well, actually, what I'd like to do, Mitch, with respect to everyone
Yeah.
on the call, we have pretty much come up to time now, but we do have some questions that could probably be 45 minutes per question. Um, but what I'd like to do now is ask Father to close with a prayer, and those that we do have a few people signing off on the chat. So, Father, if you would be so kind to close us in prayer, and then we'll make some final comments, and then we'll stay on for additional questions.
And forgive me, I'm having computer issues, so I can't show my face, even if I wanted to. Maybe that's a positive thing that the Lord has figured out for the evening. So, but either way, I'm here with all of you and enjoyed this very, very much. And thank you, first of all, to you, Steve, and to all those who organized this beautiful program, and to Tim and Mitch, also that I know real well. Mitch used to be my parishioner in Raleigh, North Carolina. And that's where he got the name Mitchin, because he worked in the kitchen at the Greek festival. So just so you know that, a little tidbit about Mitch, right?
We'll talk about competencies later.
Okay, so forgive me for that interruption, but let us close with a prayer. The grace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and the love of God the Father, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with all of us. Amen. God bless you all.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
And this will officially end the session for this evening. I do want to encourage you to come to our next session on August 17th, where we will have an additional two very distinguished presenters. The focus will be, the title is Beyond Stewardship, fundraising for parish initiatives and capital campaigns. And Nick Chakos, who is the Executive Director of Orthodox Ministry Services and has done a great deal of capital campaign work, will be on, in addition to Melpomene Murdakis. Melpo is the Director of Parish Plan Giving. Many times that goes over into the establishment of endowment programs, and she's a director with the Archdiocese. And I can assure you that they are both experts in this field. As a matter of fact, I had the honor of presenting with them a clergy lady on the concept of capital campaigns as well. So with that, thank you very much. Officially, thank you to Tim and Mitch. Just let you know in the chat, there's a lot of compliments on the format tonight. People really enjoying that. So thank you for bringing that to this entire series as well. With that, we do have some questions. So those of you that would like to depart, please do.